Vaughan, the man needs no introduction. The man, the myth, the legend. One of the most iconic blues guitarists of all time who inspired a generation of players, myself included. Now, there is so much that goes into making Stevie Ray Vaughan the kind of legendary player that he is. The intensity, the vibe, the speed, the rhythmic accuracy, the way he's always playing in the pocket. There's 100 different things that we could cover. And it can make trying to capture some of those elements and recreate a bit of that SRV magic very overwhelming for players who like that style. Where do you even really begin? Well, that is what today's lesson is all about. We're going to look at a specific little box shape that Stevie Ray Vaughan uses a lot in his playing, and some of the very kind of specific Stevie Ray Vaughan things that he does in that box shape. So rather than you thinking, where am I even going to start to sound like SRV? Well, you're going to start right here, and we're going to break it down, step by step, and give you some real actionable things that you can get started on today. So let's get into it. So step number one, we got to find this box shape. We've got to figure out what it is. And this is nice and straightforward. Stevie Ray Vaughan had real two huge influences in his playing. Obviously many, but the ones that really stand out are Jimi Hendrix and Albert King. And of these two, really Albert King is the vibe that Stevie Ray Vaughan brings to a lot of his go-to phrases and playing. There's a variety of reasons for this, but one of the most important is that Stevie Ray Vaughan really zones in on this box shape, which is the focus of this lesson, the Albert King box. Now, we're playing in the key of B. I've tuned down in kind of Stevie Ray Vaughan style down to E flat, so technically it's B flat that we're playing in, but in terms of positions on the fretboard, we're playing in B, and that's what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of the lesson rather than always referring to B flat. Now I've got a whole deep dive on the Albert King box. It's linked below, so if you've never encountered this, you want to know what it's all about, head over there for all of the juicy details on that. But as a quick little recap, the Albert King box is simply 5 notes from the second shape of the minor pentatonic scale. So from the top 3 strings of the second shape. So in the key of B, we've got the 11th fret on the G string, and then the 10th and 12th frets on the B and the E string, like this. So nice and straightforward. Nothing really complicated there. Use the fingerings that I'm using there. So take that middle finger to play the 11th fret on the G, and then the 1st and the 3rd fingers to play the 10th and the 12th frets on the B and the E strings, okay? This is a movable box shape. All of these examples are in B, but you could shift this to A, G, E, whatever. You can play it all over the fretboard. And without kind of diving too deep into it and repeating what I've already got in that video link below, it works so well for a couple of reasons, mostly because of bending. So the 11th fret on the G string and the 12th fret on the B string, these 2 notes are not really so good for bending, but everything else, you can throw a whole load of cool bends in there and it's just going to sound awesome. So, step number 1, get to grips with that shape. Play across it, mess around with it, sort of slide between the notes, hammer-ons, pull-offs, bends, and more bends. Apply that juicy kind of SRV vibe on the vibrato and the pick attack, and just kind of get comfortable incorporating that box in your playing. Once you've done that, head over to step number 2, and we're going to look at some of the specific SRV things that he does to kind of put his own spin on it, and that we can do to add in a little bit of magic, that magic in our playing. See you over there. The first thing that Stevie Ray Vaughan does a lot in his playing to kind of make this box shape his own is he adds in 1 extra note. Now, this is a minor box shape, okay? So all of the notes are just 5 notes from the minor pentatonic scale as they appear in that second shape of the scale. So there's nothing major about it. However, what Stevie Ray Vaughan does is he adds this additional note in between the 2 notes on the top string. So if we play in this box in the key of B, we've got this. So he's adding 1 extra note in there. Now, For those of you who are a little bit more interested in theory, what is going on here is on that top string, sort of intervallically, we've got the flat third from the minor pentatonic scale. That is the kind of strongest minor sounding interval available to us. So that 10th fret is the minor. And then that middle finger there is the major. So that's the major third. So that's a really, really strongly kind of major warm tonality. And by mixing the two, Vaughan is mixing the sounds of the minor and the major pentatonic scale. So rather than it being sort of unanimously cold and, aggressive and melancholic, throwing that major note into the mix makes things a little bit more ambiguous. It's still got the same bite, it's still got the same vibe, but there's something slightly different in there. There's a slightly different flavor. And that's all because of the major element of that interval. So that's the second step. Once you've got to grips with the box, add that extra note in, and then start to bring that through into the mix. Start to think about how you can target that, slide into it, slide out of it, bend it, and all of that good stuff. And once you feel comfortable there, head over to the next step where we'll look at a very, very specific thing that Vaughan does, targeting that note and in fact all of the notes on the top string to kind of move between those two tonalities in a very fluid and interesting way. Step number 3, it is time to go full Texas flood style. So what are we going to be doing here? We're going to be what I call bend stacking, which is where Vaughan takes those 3 notes that he's got on the top string and he literally just bends the hell out of every single one of them, just bend after bend after bend, moving between those different notes in interesting ways. So I kind of did something similar in that opening solo, which was a blend of the actual solo from the song Tightrope and a bit of my own improvisation. But you're going to see this really, really strongly in Texas Flood, in the intro solo and in the main solo, where Vaughan is kind of doing ideas like this. So, as the name suggests, he's literally just stacking bends on top of each other. Now, this is an amazing way of building tension and ramping up the intensity of your solos, bringing a bit of that SRV vibe without the speed. Because one of the big challenges when you want to sound like SRV is the speed. He's always kind of got his foot on the gas, and it makes it very difficult for players, especially earlier in the journey, to be able to replicate the speed of what he's doing. But here, we can absolutely replicate the intensity. So, what can we do? Each of these notes, or let's take each note by turn. The first finger, so in this case the 10th fret, you can bend up either a half step or a full step, so a semitone or a full tone. If you go a semitone, you're going to bend into the major. If you go a full tone, which maybe I'm not even going to be able to do with the gauge of these strings, which is a little bit on the spicier side, then you're going to go all the way up here. So you're going to go to the 4th, which is an interval from the minor pentatonic scale. So you've got 2 different options there. Each one is going to sound awesome. I did just about manage that full tone bend in the end. When we go to that new note from the major scale, the major third, the best option there really, I would say, is just to bend a half step. And then you're going to go from that kind of major third into the minor pentatonic 4th. And then when we get to this kind of 4th here, you've got 2 options. You can bend up a semitone, and that's going to create quite a dissonant sound because we're going to be targeting the flat 5th there, which is the blue note, very, very dissonant sounding blue note, and we'll cover that more in a second. Or you can bend up a tone and go to the 5th. And that second one is not going to be quite so dissonant, it's just going to sound really, really awesome. And honestly, you can just move between those, or I would just urge you to move between those in a way that feels right to you. So one of the ways that Stevie Ray does this is he actually walks up the string. So he goes... So he's kind of starting at the bottom and literally walking up, but you can really experiment here and just move between the notes in different ways, a little bit like this. really, really cool thing about that is that it builds all of this tension. And then there's a couple of different ways of resolving that, okay? We can resolve it by hitting that 12th fret here, which is the tonic note of B. And it's always going to be directly there in that box shape, no matter which key you're playing in. So or we can pull this little lick out of our hat to kind of really resolve that tension in a very, very cool way. I did it in my intro solo. Stevie Ray Vaughan does it all the time, but that is deserving of its own central, special spot in this lesson. So we'll come to that in a moment. But just to finish up on this bend stacking idea, one other thing that you can do when we get to this is what I did in that intro solo, and again, what Stevie Ray Vaughan does big time in Texas Flood, which is where, so you move, you push up. This is a little bit tricky, but it's a really, really cool technique to bring that SRV vibe. You push up, your fingers are now covering the E string and the B string. You bend both strings up. And then you hit both those strings together. I would recommend doing that on the 12th fret, so the top note in the box, and just hitting that bend over and over again, and using that kind of as your ultimate, like, this is the most intense it's gonna get, before you then go and do something else. That's what Stevie Ray Vaughan does in Texas Flood, and it's a really, really kind of high point in the solo. Again, a very, very cool trick to try. Immediately brings that, I mean, who else is that bringing the vibe of but Stevie Ray Vaughan? It sounds amazing and a very, very cool thing to try in your solos. So that is bend stacking. Give it a go. Test it out over backing tracks. Try and use it, to build tension. Don't overuse it because it definitely has a very distinctive flavor. You don't want to overuse it, but give that a go. And when you're ready, let's head over to the next point where we'll look at another way that sort of Stevie Ray Vaughan manipulates the notes in this box. Point number 4 is we are going to be targeting the flat 5. Now, the flat 5 is the blues note. It is the most kind of spicy note available, essentially, and it's a really, really cool note that appears all the time in the blues, and Stevie Ray Vaughan uses a lot to kind of create little bursts of tension in his playing. Exactly like that. So, at the top of the box, what we've got here is if we're talking about intervals, we've got the flat third and then the 4th from the minor pentatonic scale. Directly above the 4th is the flat 5th. Now, if you hang out on that note, that's going to be a level of spice that your audience just is not ready for, nor will they ever be ready for, in fact. But if you hit that note fleetingly by, say, sliding into it and out of it, bending up to it, and then bringing it back down, or sort of just executing any technique, hammer on, pull off, whatever it might be, quickly, then you get this beautiful, bluesy burst of tension. It sounds absolutely amazing, and then you just get off it and you just move on with your life and you go to something that is less tense and less spicy. But you hear that quite a lot in Stevie Ray Vaughan's playing, and because it's right there in that box, it's just another awesome option for you to try. You just dip in there, grab that flat 5 sound, and then move off it. Wonderful. And unlike the bend stacking, which kind of needs a certain amount of time and maybe is only more suitable in a kind of certain style of Stevie Ray Vaughan song, or, it's really a big piece of concept to kind of shoehorn in anywhere, you can just hit that flat 5 whenever you want, basically, and it's going to sound great. So, nice, little, easy, quick one to get under your fingers here. Give that a go, and when you're ready, let's head on to the final and 5th point, where we're going to join the dots and bring this box into our first minor pentatonic shape in a very, very cool way. I'll see you over there. So, step number 5, we are now going to learn this absolute beauty of an SRV lick, which very effectively and in a very cool way joins you from this kind of Albert King, Stevie Ray Vaughan box back to the first shape of the minor pentatonic scale. Now, Stevie Ray Vaughan uses this all the time in songs like Texas Flood, in songs like Tightrope, which is the kind of solo that I open this lesson with, even in some of his more relaxed, chilled out sort of instrumental pieces like Riviera Paradise. So, not only is this lick going to provide you with a very cool way of getting from sort of point A to point B, but it's immediately going to give you that SRV vibe. And because of this, a lot of the kind of SRV proteges, if you like, you know, your Kenny Wayne Shepherds, Philip Sace, those kind of guys, you're going to hear that same lick being applied in a lot of their playing. And I love this lick so much that my videographer, who helps me with some of the solos and ideas that I put together for these lessons, often says, man, you've got to stop using that lick because you've used it about 5 times in that solo. I just can't help myself. It's too good. So let's have a look at it in a bit more detail. Now, what we're doing is we're playing in this second box shape. And we're going to then do the following. So the core of this idea is as follows. You're going to take your first finger, in this case in the key of B, you're going to put that on the 10th fret of the E string. Then on the B string, you're going to execute 3 ideas basically in one. You're going to, with your third finger, play the 12th fret of the B string, pull that off to the 10th fret, and then slide that down to the 7th fret all in one go. So you've got and you can actually finish the lick there if you want, okay? You can finish the lick there, or you can kind of use that first finger and drop it down onto the 7th fret of the E string and play that there. So you could go, okay, that's kind of step 1. You can, however, dig a little bit deeper than that if you want, and a few of the kind of Stevie Ray Vaughan things that you're going to hear him do a lot would be something like this. So that's kind of the way that I often like to use it, is you do that slide, then you jump between that first finger on the B and the E string. So you'd go E string, B string, then you'd go to the 10th fret on the E string, so the kind of the top of the first shape of the minor pentatonic scale, bend that up, don't let the bend come back down, so kind of cut it at the top, and then just play that 10th fret by itself. So you'd have. And from there, honestly, you are in a prime position to just create some killer licks in the first pentatonic position. You're right there. You can do all this cool stuff and you just play across that box however you want. But any time that you find yourself in that kind of Albert King, Stevie Ray Vaughan box, just throw that lick in and it's going to be absolutely awesome. Now, as I just kind of clocked as I was playing that there, when you do that, you can actually slide down with your first finger across both the B and the E strings. And if you then start to do those kind of little jumping licks, or jumping notes rather, that move you between the B and the E, you've got your finger right there, so you don't have to sort of hop with the first finger. If you find that easier, that's apparently the way I play it. I only just realized this now, but it could be potentially useful for you. And in that way, you're connected between the first and the second shapes. And if you're kind of running out of ideas in the Albert King box, you build that tension, build it up with some bend stacking. And then go and just continue soloing in the first box, somewhere else on the fretboard, and it's going to be just awesome. So, quick lesson summary, because we've done a whistle-stop tour through this kind of huge part of SRV's playing. Step number 1, go into the Albert King box. Step number 2, add in the major third from the major pentatonic scale on the high E string. Step number 3, bend as much as you can all across the box and add those bends together in terms of bend, to use bend stacking on that high E string. Step number 4, for a little bit of added spice, target the flat 5, which is going to be sitting at the 13th fret on the high E string. And the final step, when the time is right and you feel you're exhausting what you've got going in that Albert King box, you're kind of doing your bend stacking, then you're going to do that Texas flood style. And you're thinking, wow, okay, I've used up all of my options. Then just grab that little Stevie Ray Vaughan lick. And you've absolutely smashed it. You've maximized the mileage of that box. You've got out in a really, really cool way, and then you can go and continue to solo and create some cool ideas in that first pentatonic box. Now, a couple of closing points from me, guys. At every stage of this process, break it down into manageable chunks. Stevie Ray Vaughan was not a guy who was using, 100 different scales or a lot of complexity from a theoretical point of view in his playing. What he was doing was taking simple note groupings from the minor pentatonic scale, the Albert King box, and he was throwing technique, intensity, vibrato, bending, a spicy pick attack. He was using everything that he possibly could to bring the intensity of those notes out in the mix. And that's what you need to be doing at every stage of this process. If you're just going... oh, I don't really sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan. That's because the vibe is missing. So you've really got to focus on the intensity as a big, big key part of this, and the technique. Explore, dig deep, look at all the different ways that you can kind of get life from this, and listen to some of those tracks that I linked earlier. Listen to your Texas Floods, your Tightropes, your Riviera Paradises. See how Vaughan is using it. Change It is another great song as well, where he's using this box. Listen to those songs and see if you can identify what's going on. And that will help you learn those tracks, and also help you kind of steal, or borrow, I should say, adapt ideas from the big man himself. That is pretty much it from me, guys. Good luck implementing all these ideas. If you want the tabs and the backing track for this, and the kind of tabs for all the little different links, as well as fretboard diagrams and some extra bonus stuff, click the link below to head over and join the Blues Club. That's where you'll find all of my best stuff and all of my best teaching. And if you would like to see more videos like this, more deep dives into players like Stevie Ray Vaughan, or maybe even a full course, let me know in the comments below. I had a blast filming this, and I really hope it was helpful, and I would love to do similar stuff in the future if it's useful to you guys. In the meantime, good luck, and I'll see you in the next one.